Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you today from the depths of that sanctum within the realm of the unconscious where dwell those parts of ourselves we fear to know. For you are not merely a conscious being pursuing life's aims, but also a complex of unseen forces, and it is here that the shadow lurks to thwart your truest efforts. Often you ask, why do I stand in my own light? The answer lies not in failure of will, but in the unconscious striving for equilibrium. When consciousness overreaches, the unconscious pushes back, not to harm, but to preserve. This is the paradox of self-sabotage, a guardian in disguise. Yet this guardian is not your ally until you bring it into the light. Your shadow, those parts you deny, reject, or fear, drives resistance through patterns of procrastination, self-doubt, and inner conflict. Without recognition, these unacknowledged forces gain autonomy and act as hidden saboteurs. But redemption lies in the journey of individuation. The integration of consciousness with its shadow. This is not a contest, but a communion. By naming the repressed, by gazing into it through dreams and active imagination, through art, journaling, or creative dialogue, you invite the shadow to speak, to reveal its pain, and to be embraced as part of your total psyche. Only then does the saboteur transform into an ally. You may look upon the repeated patterns of your own failure and wonder at their irrationality, at the inexplicable way in which you stand before opportunities only to stumble, as though an invisible hand were turning your steps aside. Yet, if one peers beneath the surface of mere conscious intention, one perceives that these acts of self-sabotage are not mere weakness, nor simple folly. They are, in fact, the silent murmurs of a deeper intelligence within, one that belongs to the vast and often uncharted region of psyche which lies beneath the threshold of awareness. Here, in the shadowed corridors of the unconscious, exists a preservation instinct of remarkable subtlety, one that seeks to maintain the equilibrium of the whole, even at the expense of what the conscious ego desires. The ego, in its striving for mastery and recognition, often overreaches. It attempts to seize life, to assert dominion over fate, and to sculpt reality according to conscious plans. Yet this overreaching is perilous, for the psyche is not a simple linear mechanism. It is a living organism with many voices, many forces, some of which are entirely beyond the control of the conscious mind. In this sense, the unconscious functions as a guardian, a regulator, intervening in ways that may appear disruptive or self-defeating. Its apparent sabotage is a protective measure, a warning that the ego's current course threatens imbalance, that the attempt to assert conscious will in one direction may come at the cost of psychic wholeness. Consider how one might resist change even when change is desired. The unconscious is not merely passive, it is active, responsive, and imaginative. It may deploy dreams, impulses, sudden hesitations, or compulsions as mechanisms of warning or correction. These actions, though often misinterpreted by the ego as self-inflicted harm, are in fact expressions of an innate wisdom that seeks to prevent injury to the totality of the self. Thus, the same patterns that appear as sabotage, procrastination, self-doubt, avoidance, and repeated failure must be understood not as enemies to be vanquished, but as signals, messages from the psyche alerting one to the deeper currents at play. This preservation instinct has its roots in the history of the individual, in accumulation of experiences, both conscious and unconscious. Each decision, each conflict unresolved, leaves its imprint upon the soul, forming patterns of tension and inhibition. When one ventures toward aspirations too abruptly, without the accompaniment of inner preparation, these latent structures assert themselves. They seek not destruction, but a slow harmonization, a gradual alignment between the conscious desires and the unconscious capacities. The self-sabotage, then, is a form of regulation, an unconscious negotiation between what one wishes to become and what one is prepared to integrate within the psychic framework. It is important, therefore, to approach these patterns not with self-reproach, but with disciplined observation. one must learn to attend to the messages encoded in hesitation and failure. In doing so, the individual develops a dialogue with the unconscious, cultivating awareness of the hidden dynamics that guide behavior. The moments of apparent sabotage transform into opportunities for insight. They reveal the areas where the psyche requires attention, where shadow elements cry out for recognition, and where the ego must learn to temper its demands with patience and understanding. Ultimately, self-sabotage is not the failure of the spirit, but the unconscious striving to preserve the integrity of the whole. It is a subtle reminder that consciousness is not supreme, that the unseen aspects of the soul demand acknowledgement and respect. The path forward is not to conquer these manifestations of the unconscious with brute force, but to listen, to reflect, and to integrate them into the conscious life. In doing so, one gradually transcends the self, defeating patterns, aligning will with wisdom, and desire with the deeper rhythms of the soul. In this careful integration lies not only the cessation of sabotage, but the emergence of a fuller, more harmonious self, capable of pursuing life's aims without inner resistance, yet with the profound knowledge that the psyche, in all its hidden complexity, has guided the journey every step of the way. Within the human psyche there exists a domain that is often ignored, feared, or denied. It is not accessible to the casual glance of the conscious mind, for it dwells in the shadowy recesses of our being, the repository of those qualities, impulses, and desires that we refuse to acknowledge. Yet it is precisely in this hidden region that the forces which most strongly influence our actions, especially those that undermine us, are nurtured. The shadow, as it manifests, is the part of ourselves that we have disowned, the aspects we regard as unacceptable or unworthy, yet they persist undiminished beneath the surface of awareness. It is here that our hidden saboteur resides, not as a malevolent entity from without, but as a living reflection of what we have refused to confront within. The shadow is not merely a collection of weaknesses, it is a reservoir of suppressed potential, both dark and powerful. When left unacknowledged, it gains autonomy, shaping our thoughts, emotions, and actions in ways we cannot consciously control. The self, in its innocence or hubris, may perceive these disruptions as inexplicable obstacles, as the random emergence of fear, doubt, or failure. Yet these manifestations are not accidental. They are the unconscious asserting itself, demanding recognition, and reminding us that the psyche, in its entirety, cannot be ignored without consequence. The hidden saboteur works subtly, often in the guise of hesitation, self-criticism, procrastination, or impulsive contradiction. Each act of sabotage, no matter how small, is a message, a communication from the depths of the self that must be interpreted and understood. It is in the confrontation with the shadow that the true work of self-awareness begins. To recognize this hidden saboteur is not to surrender to it, nor to fear it, but to understand it as an integral part of one's psychic economy. The shadow contains elements that we have deemed unacceptable: anger, envy, pride, desire, but it also contains a kind of latent wisdom. In those qualities that we deny, there are truths about ourselves, lessons about our limitations, and guides to our greater wholeness. Only through conscious engagement with these disowned aspects can one begin to dissolve the patterns of sabotage that have so often obstructed one's path. This engagement requires courage and patience. The shadow does not reveal itself all at once. It emerges gradually, often through dreams, fantasies, or the sudden intrusion of unexpected behavior. To confront it, one must resist the instinct to suppress or condemn, and instead allow a dialogue to unfold. In this dialogue, one begins to recognize the underlying motives behind seemingly self-destructive actions. The saboteur is revealed not as an enemy, but as a teacher, pointing toward unresolved conflicts, neglected needs, and unintegrated aspects of the personality. By facing the shadow directly, one transforms the hidden saboteur from a force of disruption into a source of insight. Integration, however, is the key. It is not enough merely to acknowledge the shadow. It must be brought into the conscious life, not as a tyrant, but as a partner. To ignore it is to invite repetition, for unconscious is relentless in its attempt to communicate. Each act of self-sabotage is a call to consciousness, a beckoning toward reconciliation with the disowned self. Through careful reflection, creative engagement, and honest self-examination, one begins to see the shadow not as a separate entity, but as an essential part of the total psyche. In this integration lies the possibility of liberation from unconscious compulsion, the cessation of repetitive patterns that diminish the vitality of life, and the emergence of a fuller, more balanced self. Ultimately, the hidden saboteur is both warning and guide, obstacle and teacher. It is a necessary force, reminding us that the path to wholeness is never linear, that the conscious mind alone cannot govern the complexities of the soul. By confronting the shadow, listening to its messages, and integrating its wisdom, one transforms disruption into harmony, chaos into insight, and fear into understanding. What was once a saboteur becomes an ally in the journey toward self-realization, revealing the profound truth that within the darkness of our own psyche resides the light of self-knowledge, waiting to illuminate the path forward. The human psyche is a vast, intricate landscape, and within it lies a tension between the forces of consciousness and the untamed depths of the unconscious. To live fully, one must recognize that the conscious ego, with its desires and ambitions, represents but a fragment of the totality of the self. There exists beyond the narrow confines of awareness a rich and complex world of impulses, archetypes, and hidden energies that shape behavior and perception. To deny or suppress these elements is to live only in part, to allow only a superficial reflection of one's potential emerge. It is here that the work of individuation becomes essential, the careful and courageous integration of all aspects of the psyche, so that the self may achieve wholeness rather than fragmentary existence. Individuation is not a process of control or conquest. It is not an act of forcing unconscious to bend to the will of the ego. Rather, it is an unfolding, a dialogue between conscious and unconscious, wherein each is acknowledged, respected, and brought into harmony. The unconscious is not a mere repository of chaos, nor is it simply a collection of repressed impulses. It is a living, organizing intelligence, guiding the self toward balance and equilibrium. When its messages are ignored or suppressed, they emerge in the form of disturbances, compulsions, or repeated patterns of failure. The psyche, in its striving for completeness, does not tolerate neglect. It insists upon recognition. The journey of integration requires that one confront the parts of oneself that have been denied or disowned, the impulses that shame teaches one to reject, the desires that fear urges one to conceal, the emotions that society declares unworthy. All of these must be seen, acknowledged, and incorporated into conscious life. To suppress them is to invite internal conflict, to cultivate an inner division that manifests as self-sabotage, indecision, or malaise. True individuation, however, does not eliminate conflict. It transforms conflict into understanding, tension into insight. By embracing what was once hidden, one allows the unconscious to contribute its wisdom, rather than struggle against it. This integration is a gradual, patient endeavor. It is not achieved through a single act of will, but through ongoing reflection, attention, and self-observation. Dreams, fantasies, creative expression, and introspection all serve as conduits through which the unconscious communicates, offering symbols, images, and scenarios that reveal the state of the psyche. By attending to these signs without fear or judgment, one begins to discern the subtle patterns that shape behavior, the recurring motifs that indicate unresolved tensions, and the latent potentials that have awaited recognition. Each insight gained through this engagement strengthens the connection between the conscious and unconscious realms, fostering a unity that supports both psychological health and authentic self-expression. In this process, the ego must learn humility. It is not the master of the self, but a participant in a larger, more intricate dialogue. The unconscious holds knowledge of one's capacities, limitations, and path in life that the ego alone cannot grasp. By surrendering the illusion of complete control and embracing the wisdom of the unconscious, one cultivates the conditions for genuine growth. Suppression, by contrast, is an attempt to impose artificial order, a denial of the natural dynamics of the psyche. It leads inevitably to tension, resistance, and the repetition of maladaptive patterns. Integration, in contrast, harmonizes these forces, allowing the self to emerge as a coherent, resilient, and creative whole. The fruits of this endeavor are profound. The individual who undertakes the work of individuation gains not only freedom from the compulsions of the unconscious, but also access to a richer, more nuanced understanding of the self. Life's challenges are met with greater clarity and adaptability, not because the ego dominates, but because it moves in concert with the deeper intelligence of the psyche. Inner conflicts lose their paralyzing power. Impulses that once threatened disorder become sources of creativity and insight, and the shadowed aspects of the self become allies in the ongoing process of growth. Thus, individuation is the art of embracing the entirety of one's being. It is the conscious cultivation of wholeness through integration rather than suppression, the recognition that true strength and wisdom emerge not from denial, but from understanding. In aligning consciousness with the unconscious, one transcends the fragmented life, achieving a state in which the self can act with authenticity, resilience, and profound insight into the mysteries of its own nature. In this union lies the essence of psychological maturity, the liberation of the self, and the realization of the potential that resides within every human soul. The unconscious speaks to us in many ways, yet its language is seldom straightforward. It communicates through symbols, images, and narratives that emerge in dreams, fantasies, and spontaneous imagination. These expressions are not mere curiosities of the mind. They are the voice of the depths, a realm that holds both the burdens and the wisdom we have yet to recognize. To engage with these messages consciously is to undertake the work of the shadow, to confront those elements of the self that have been hidden, repressed, or denied. This process is delicate, profound, and transformative, for it allows the energies of the unconscious to enter conscious life in a meaningful and constructive manner. Dreams, in particular, serve as windows into the hidden psyche. They are not random. They are deliberate manifestations of the unconscious seeking recognition. In dreams, one encounters figures, events, and situations that often seem strange or disturbing, yet each carries a message, a reflection of inner states that require attention. The recurring nightmare, the dream that unsettles, the image that captivates, all these are invitations to dialogue with the unconscious. By observing dreams with patience and curiosity, by noting their symbols and emotions, one begins to perceive the patterns that govern behavior, the hidden fears, desires, and conflicts that shape daily life. What may first appear as chaos gradually reveals itself as meaningful guidance, offering insights that the conscious mind could not produce alone. Active imagination extends this dialogue beyond the nocturnal experience. It is a deliberate engagement with the images and figures that arise spontaneously in the mind. In this practice, one allows the imagination to unfold freely, to converse with the characters and symbols that appear, not as illusions to be dismissed, but as living expressions of the psyche. In dialogue with these inner figures, the individual can explore emotions, motivations, and impulses that have been repressed. The unconscious ceases to act solely through compulsion and begins to contribute consciously, offering perspectives that illuminate choices, reveal hidden strengths, and uncover the roots of internal resistance. Through active imagination, the shadow ceases to be a force of sabotage and becomes an instrument of self-knowledge. Shadow work, when pursued through these methods, requires courage. One must confront aspects of the self that evoke shame, fear, or guilt. The qualities we deny, anger, envy, greed, and desire, are not separate from us. They are integral parts of the psyche that seek acknowledgement. To engage with them directly is to resist the natural tendency toward repression, yet the reward is profound. By bringing these elements into conscious awareness, one diminishes their power to act unconsciously. The compulsive repetitions, the self-destructive impulses, and the patterns of avoidance that once ruled behavior lose their dominion. The shadow, when integrated, transforms from a hidden adversary into a source of insight, creativity, and inner strength. The process is not linear. Some encounters with the shadow may be unsettling or disorienting. The images and figures that emerge may challenge long-held assumptions about oneself, revealing contradictions and complexities that the ego has refused to see. Yet these experiences are necessary for growth. They serve as mirrors, reflecting both the richness and the incompleteness of the self. By attending to them with honesty and reflection, the individual gradually builds a bridge between consciousness and the unconscious, creating a dialogue that fosters balance, awareness, and psychological resilience. Moreover, the integration achieved through shadow work has ramifications beyond the inner life. As the unconscious becomes a collaborator rather than a saboteur, actions in the external world align more closely with authentic intention, decisions are made with greater clarity, relationships are approached with deeper empathy, and creativity flourishes. The psyche, once fragmented and conflicted, becomes unified in purpose and expression, capable of navigating life with both wisdom and flexibility. Ultimately, shadow work through active imagination and dreams is the cultivation of self-knowledge and inner harmony. It is the art of listening to the hidden depths, of honoring what has been repressed, and of transforming the unconscious from a source of obstruction into a wellspring of insight. In this integration lies the possibility of true freedom, the ability to act from a whole, conscious self, guided by both reason and the profound wisdom of the unseen realms within. Through this intimate engagement with the shadow, one discovers not only the obstacles to fulfillment, but also the latent capacities, creativity, and strength that were always present, awaiting recognition and embrace. So I bid you, descend into the darkness with brave heart and open mind. Let the voices of your shadow speak, and listen, for within the shadow lies your lost power, waiting not to destroy you, but to complete you. And thus, having reclaimed your wholeness, you step into your own strength, no longer sabotaged, but sovereign.